Good evening, my children of the fright. It's me, your favorite demon of the season, the Collector. And I'm back with another Friday Night Fable Fright, chosen by you, my amazing Fright followers. On Instagram, I gave you all a list of chapter titles and asked you to choose the one that I would read for you all next. Well, it was a near landslide, but before I let you know what the winner was, the book that you have chosen from is Night Frights, written by one of my favorite terror of the typewriters, J.B. Stamper. Night Frights is an Apple paperback and it was published in 1993 by Scholastic. This book contains 13 spooky stories to keep you checking under your bed all night long. And now, the chapter that you have all chosen for your Friday Night Fable Fright is Nightmare. Shall we begin? Before Chris fell asleep that night, she went over in her mind all her plans for the next day. She liked everything in her life to be neat and orderly, and she never did anything on the spur of the moment. Sounds rather boring. Tomorrow was Saturday, and she had everything planned. In the morning, she was babysitting. In the afternoon, she had to help her parents mow the lawn. Then in the evening, she was going to her friend Jen's house for a sleepover. She fell asleep thinking about Jen's house, which was an old bungalow sitting along the river that flowed through their town. The dream seemed to float into Chris's mind from out of the mysterious shadows of the night. She was standing at the bottom of a staircase, looking up. The stairs were narrow and steep, and seemed to wind upward forever. She started to climb them, feeling the thick oriental carpet covering them under her feet. She was climbing, and then suddenly she stood before a door. The door was small and frightened her, but she pushed it open anyway and stepped inside the room. The first thing she noticed were the windows, covered by dark shutters. Little shafts of moonlight drifted through them, but otherwise the room was dark, except for one candle sitting on a stand by the bed. The candle flickered and sputtered, throwing out scary shadows across the room. Chris felt her feet move across the room, and she heard the door slam behind her. Then there was a knock on the door, and a strange woman came into the room. The woman had a face as white as bone, and eyes as dark as coals. She came closer and closer to Chris, with her stringy hair falling across her face, and she said, "Sweet dreams, sweet dreams." Then she reached out her hands to Chris, and Chris sat upright in bed, her eyes wide open and her breath coming in short gasps. She flicked on the light on her bedstand and stared around her room. There wasn't any old woman with black eyes and stringy hair. The room was safe and warm, just like it had been when she'd gone to sleep. But the nightmare had seemed so real. She had seen the woman's hands reaching out to her. Chris squeezed her eyes shut for a second, and again she saw the woman's face. Opening her eyes, she looked at her clock. 4 a.m. Chris knew she couldn't go back to sleep. She didn't want to be in that room again, and she never wanted to see the woman's face. She huddled under her covers with her eyes open and stared at the walls of her room until dawn came and her alarm clock went off. Chris went to her babysitting job as planned, and she helped her parents mow the lawn that afternoon. But all through the day, she thought about the nightmare. She became more and more worried about going to Jen's house for the sleepover that night. After all, she had been thinking about Jen's house before she fell asleep. Maybe there was a secret stairway in that rambling bungalow. A secret stairway that led up to the room. Without asking her parents first, Chris called up Jen just before dinner and told her that she wanted to cancel the sleepover. As soon as she had made the call, she felt better. There was no way she wanted to be near Jen's house tonight, just in case dreams do come true. As Chris sat down to eat with her mother and father, she told them about her change in plans. She expected them to look happy, because they always complained that they didn't see enough of her on weekends. But their faces fell when she said she'd be home that night. "But Chris, we made plans ourselves," her mother said. "We knew you'd be at Jen's house, so we decided to drive to the city. We're going to the opera and then staying overnight in a hotel. We've spent too much money on tickets to change our plans. Just call up Jen and say you're coming after all." Chris saw the woman's face from her nightmare flash across her mind. She looked at her mother and shook her head. "No, I can't do that, Mum. I just can't." Her parents looked at each other and then at Chris. "But you can't stay here alone," her father said. "Now just be reasonable. Call your friend Jen." The ringing of the telephone interrupted what he was going to say. Chris ran to pick it up and said hello to Emily, a new girl who just moved into town. She'd been trying to make friends with Chris. You want me to come over for a sleepover tonight?" Chris said into the phone, watching her parents' faces light up with relief. "Okay, I guess so. My parents say it's all right. Sure, they'll drop me off around 7 tonight. Yeah, I'll bring my sleeping bag and pillow. Yeah, okay, bye." Chris hung up the telephone and sat back down at the table. Her parents seemed happy about the way things had worked out. But she really wanted to stay home in her own safe room. But at least she was going to Emily's house, not Jen's. She didn't want to be anywhere near that old bungalow by the river tonight. Her parents dropped her off in front of Emily's house at exactly 7 o'clock. Chris had never thought about where Emily might live, and she was surprised to find out that it was so close to Jen's house. In fact, it was the same kind of rambling bungalow built along the river. Emily and her father answered the door and welcomed Chris in. Emily said her mother was away, but would be back before they went to sleep. The night passed quickly, and Chris liked Emily more and more as she got to know her better. By the time the clock struck midnight, they were still wound up and laughing, but Emily's father came downstairs and said it was time for them to go to sleep. Emily led the way up the stairs to her bedroom on the 3rd floor. Chris walked up the narrow, steep staircase after her, feeling the soft carpet under her feet. She tried to ignore the hints of fear that were flitting around in her brain as her feet climbed higher and higher. Suddenly, Emily stopped on the stairs and turned around to face Chris. "I forgot something important," she said. "You go on up. I'll be right back." Before Chris could answer, Emily hurried back down the steps. Chris didn't know what to do but continue climbing the staircase. After all, Emily seemed like a perfectly nice person, and so did her father. It was just the staircase that bothered her. Chris came around a sharp bend in the steps and suddenly found herself at the top of the staircase. As she stood facing a small door, she felt tired. More tired than she'd ever been before. Her hand reached out to turn the knob, even though her fingers were trembling. As the door swung open, she walked through it like a sleepwalker, knowing what she would see inside. There were dark shutters over the windows, and a candle was flickering and sputtering on the bedstand. Chris walked into the room and heard the door slam behind her. Then, as she heard a knock on the door, she slowly turned around. A woman walked into the room, a woman with a bone-white face and coal-black eyes. The woman pushed the stringy hair away from her face and smiled at Chris with yellow, crooked teeth. "So glad you could come, dear. I'm Emily's mother." Chris began to back away from her and fell onto the bed, but the woman still moved toward her, smiling and mumbling under her breath. "Sweet dreams. Sweet dreams. Sweet, sweet dreams. The woman came closer and closer. Then she reached out her hands to Chris and... Well, there you go, my little fright followers. I hope those of you who chose this chapter are satisfied. Your old pal isn't going to be able to get any sleep tonight. Not that I sleep at night anyway, but you know what I mean. Thanks so much to everyone for playing Choose the Chapter. And for those of you who don't want to miss out on the next round, head on over to Instagram and follow me on @OldPalCollector for more freaks and creeps during the week. And until we shriek again, sweet dreams out there, whatever you are.